Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City of Kitchener Committee of Adjustment. I have a couple things to read into the record first of all, and then I'll explain a couple things that are unusual today. This is a meeting of the Committee of Adjustment being called to hear applications under the Planning Act for minor variance and or consent. It's a statutory public meeting. Anyone having an interest in any of these applications may make oral or written submission for the committee's consideration. The committee is going to render a verbal decision this date, and the agent or applicant will receive a copy of the committee's decision via or in writing via email 10 days after the meeting. So just a little bit of information on process. When your item comes forward, I'm going to introduce the application and ask the city staff to explain it and give a little more detail. I will advise of any late submissions we received. I'm going to ask the applicant if they are in support of the staff recommendation and if they've received the staff report. I will then invite people either in opposition or support to make oral submission. If you do and you're in opposition, there's a chair just over there that you'll see, and you can turn the mic on. I just want to let you know too that we have received your comments and we have reviewed them, so there's no need to repeat. And if you hear somebody with a delegation, please don't repeat the same thing. Give us some new information. Committee members will then ask questions of you, and we will then go back to the agent or applicant and see if he or she would like to make any further comments for our consideration. We'll then ask questions of either the agent or applicant and staff, and we'll render a decision. Just for information, normally this is a 5-member committee. Today we have 3 members, one of which has COVID, unfortunately, and he is virtually with us. Marco, hello. And so we have been advised by clerks that we do still have a quorum, so we can hold the meeting. At this time, I would ask if I could get a motion of the minutes from the regular Committee of Adjustment meeting held November 21st. Mr. McCall moves. Can I get a seconder? Marco seconds. All in favor? Motion is carried. Our next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest, and I actually have to declare an interest on the item dealing with 807 Frederick Street. I am the project manager for that application looking after the development, so I will cease to be the chair at the time, and Mr. McCall, if you could join and be the chair, that'd be great. Thank you. Our first item on the agenda is unfinished business. It's A 2023-113. It's at 9 Seabird Avenue. If the planning coordinator could introduce the application and the applicant come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So our first application is unfinished business. It's an application for minor variance for 9 Seabird Avenue. This is an application that was deferred from our September agenda. The reason for the deferral is that there was some question as to whether the new detached dwelling unit would be located in the floodplain. Since the September meeting, the applicant has prepared a topographical survey, submitted this to GRCA. They have confirmed that the ADU will not be located within the floodplain. Accordingly, staff have reviewed the application in light of the 4 tests of the Planning Act. The variance is to permit the ADU to be partially located in an exterior side yard and to permit 2 required parking spaces to be located within 6 meters of a street line. So with respect to these 2 minor variants, staff have reviewed in light of the 4 tests, finds that it meets all 4 and is recommending approval of both minor variances.
Thank you. The applicant or agent, have you reviewed the staff report and are you in support of the recommendation?
I have reviewed it and I'm in support of the recommendation.
Are there any members in the gallery in opposition to this application? Seeing none. Do we have any questions of the applicant or agent? or staff? Recognize Mr. McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for staff, and I'm just a little confused in the staff report. It says under, under the report highlights that in addition to that the recommendation be approved, in the report highlights it says the key finding of this report is that the requested minor variances need to be deferred to a future committee of the adjustment meeting. In one case it's saying approved, in one case it's saying it should be deferred. So I put that through you, Mr. Chair, to staff for clarification, if I may.
Yes, thank you through you, Chair. Good catch. That was from the previous staff report that was brought to you back in September, and staff did not omit that from the new staff report. Apologies.
You mean staff is pretty busy these days?
We have a number of reports we write. Yeah,
Yeah.
that one was missed. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Other than that, Mr. Chair, I have no concerns, and I will support this application with the minor adjustment to it.
Yeah. I have a quick question for the applicant. I think I raised the same question to you the last time. Are you planning on keeping the fence?
To be honest, I haven't decided that far ahead yet, if I'm going to keep the fence or not. But I have spoken to all the neighbors in the area. Everyone was in support. Even my neighbor that came to oppose it last time, turns out she said the only reason she showed up was because she wanted me to chop some branches down from a large evergreen tree that was hanging over her property. So I dealt with that. But yeah, everyone in the neighborhood was in support, and nobody seemed to be concerned at all. So maybe I won't have the fence. I'm probably leaning in that direction, to be honest, because I like the idea of the ADU having a view of the streetscape. I think it's a beautiful neighborhood with lots of mature trees, and I'm going to build an ADU that's like very attractive, like nice modern colors, and I want it to be seen, like I'm proud of it. I haven't built it yet, and I'm already proud of it. So maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, I'm leaning towards not having the fence, to be honest.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Can I get a motion? Mr. McCall?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that this application be approved as per the staff report, revised staff report.
Can I get a seconder? And it's seconded by Member Gambetti. Any further discussion required? Seeing none, so all in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is application A 2023-137 at 48 Betzner Avenue North. Do we have staff introduce the application and the applicant come forward?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is an application for a minor variance to permit a reduced lot width. The requirement is 13.1. The applicant's lot is only 12.4. The lot width is required to be able to construct an additional dwelling unit detached, so an ADU in the rear yard. Staff have reviewed the variance in light of the four tests. The Planning Act finds that it meets all four and is recommending approval.
Thank you. Has the applicant reviewed the staff report, and are you in support?
Yes.
Thank you. Any members in the gallery in opposition to this application? Seeing none, any questions of staff or the applicant from members? Looks pretty straightforward to me.
Not meaning to delay the meeting, I think this is a classic example of a minor variance from 12.4, from 13.1 to 12.4, which is, I guess about that big. I'm in support of this application, Mr. Chair, and I will move that this be approved as per the staff report.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Can I get a seconder? Seconded by Marco. I think there's no further discussion, so all in favor? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Okay, our next application is A 2023-138 at 136 River Road East. Could the applicant come forward, and staff, if you could introduce the application, thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a minor variance application for 136 River Road East. The existing dwelling is proposed to be demolished, and a new 9-unit multiple dwelling is proposed to be constructed in its place. It requires a number of minor variances listed in the staff report and recommendation. Staff have reviewed the variances in light of the 4 tests of the Planning Act, finds that they meet all four, and is recommending approval.
Thank you for that. Has the applicant reviewed the staff report and the recommendation?
Hello, good morning. I'm the agent, speaking on behalf of the applicant this morning. And yes, we have reviewed the report and are in support.
Thank you very much. I see we have a member of the gallery in opposition. We have read your 2 letters, I can tell you that. So if you want to just clarify or tell us about that, that'd be great. Sorry, could you also identify yourself as well, just for the record? Thank you.
My name is Christine Regan, and I am the owner of 209 Rosemount. The dwelling that they're proposing to put up is along my back fence, side fence, and moving it closer to the property line is going to impede our enjoyment of our backyard, which we use daily. We built it as a sanctuary for our mental health, as well as my husband's physical health. So I'm opposed to it being brought any closer to our property line than the restrictions that are there now. Not opposed to the building, just not wanting it closer to our property line.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, do we have questions for the delegate? I actually have one quick one. I walked by the property the other day, so I'm aware of where you're living. The existing home, I believe it was probably the original farmhouse of the area that we're talking about, is relatively close to the property line as well. And it has a small little balcony on the side. How often is that balcony used?
It depends. There were 2 tenants in the house before, so it was being used more often. It is used. They bring their dog up there and unfortunately smoke marijuana up there, which walks into our back area.
Okay, thank you very much. I do share your concerns about loss of privacy, and I'll be asking the applicant or the agent a few questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have or does the applicant want to make some further submissions for our benefit?
We're certainly mindful and understand the concerns that have been brought
Could you move the microphone up just a bit so we could hear you? Thanks.
Certainly. We're certainly mindful and understand the concerns that have been brought forward to the committee this morning. We've considered this throughout the design process. Wanted to provide some clarity on what the overall vision and objective of the design is. The intensity has been increased, and the zoning has been changed through separate city policies and processes to allow for higher density development. We do recognize, however, there is a transition to low-rise residential properties in the area. And this development proposal that we're bringing forward does meet those requirements. And through that, the intent of the design is to have a terraced building facade, both on the front of the property as well as the rear portion of the property. So what that means is that the building height would generally match what is there today, would be set back further from the existing building, and then terraced setback further for the upper floor. So the first level of the building would generally match what is existing there today. So it would have and it wasn't included as part of the initial package, but it would have a stepped back building facade, which should alleviate some of the shadowing concerns that you may see on a larger scale development. So this would be considered a low-rise development as opposed to what is permitted under the zoning for the area.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the committee members have any questions for the applicant or staff? Mr. McCall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a couple of things in this report that I'm confused about. Ever since Bill 23, I believe, that the provincial government implemented back in January, all units that have less than 10 units no longer need to go through site plan, which means that it goes through the building department, which I'm sure is quite overwhelmed with all the extra work they have to do. Mr. Chair, actually a question for you, and you may be able to give me some advice of your expertise. A few years ago, we were asking for building permits as a condition. I don't imagine this particular application is going to run afoul of the problem of building permits, but I'm wondering what staff's opinion may be on moving forward. I know the complication of approving a building permit is a condition, and the condition is for the building permit. And so I'm just wondering, Mr. Chair, if maybe over the seasonal holidays or for next year, maybe staff can give some thought how we deal with this, because I'm quite sure the applicant is going to get a building permit, but there may be instances that come up in the future where people will just go ahead and do something without a building permit. We've seen that happen, at least once or twice in the last 20 years. I'm being somewhat facetious here. So there's a question on that I would like maybe some information on down the road. The second thing is that I believe in this application, CN Rail has asked for, or they've made a request. So my question is, how do we deal with that vis-a-vis our dealing with Metrolinx?
So to answer the first question through you, Chair, staff recently brought to Council zoning bylaw amendments after Bill 23 was enacted, so that there were some additional requirements in our zoning bylaw to regulate these types of developments where we have no site plan control. So the zoning bylaw has been updated. The building permit process also has been updated to reflect Bill 23. The fact that we can't require site plan, a lot of these things are deferred to the building permit stage. It doesn't preclude you from going additionally requiring further conditions of a minor variance as it relates to these types of applications. I think your second question was related to the CN comments. They were received after the preparation of our staff report. So they were not included in the recommendation. Typically, we do include them. We have to do that. So they were not included because of the staff report deadlines. So they're before you today for your consideration and inclusion as a recommendation of approval.
Anything further?
Just so I understand that, we will be including the CN recommendations as a condition of approval for this application.
Staff would have put them in the recommendation had they been received prior to the staff report deadline. So it is staff's recommendation that they be included as conditions of approval.
So that's a minor amendment to the staff report.
Yes.
Perfect. That's all I have, other than something to comment on extra bike storage, which I think is a great idea.
Marco, I have several questions for both staff and the applicant, but do you have anything at this time? He seems to be frozen, so I'm going to carry on. I want to thank the applicant, first of all, for the additional information that helped me address some of the issues that I had. I really actually started off very negative on the whole thing. I thought you were pushing the envelope, but I recognize that the official plan, it's medium density. I recognize that this particular property could actually be going up to 8 stories, and you're looking at 3. I do have, though, some concerns about your terrace, and I want to understand a little bit more. The reason I asked the neighbor about the existing balcony is it's quite small. I suspect it'll never be used, or wasn't used in the past. You have I think a 13 by 20 foot terrace on the 3rd floor, 2 of them overlooking her backyard. Are you going to put up screening? Help me out there.
The details at this point have yet to be determined. The general design objective behind the terraced approach was to provide those upper units with multiple floors. The site is relatively compact in size, and the units, the size of the units are quite small by comparison. So in an effort to maximize the size of these units, the units have multiple levels and have created this terrace space or patio, if you will. Screening hasn't been explored at this point, or the details of that. From a building elevation perspective, there would be a wall that is extended that would act as a railing around the terraced area. From a visual perspective, it will form a part of the building facade. But certainly screening of some sort and can be explored further. But in answer to your question, no, it hasn't been at this point, but we have been considering what those railing type options or requirements would be, and it would form a part of the building face.
I've been advised by the city clerk here that we're going to have to recess just for a few minutes because our 3rd member of the committee is not with us, and he's back on. Fantastic. Marco, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. That's great. Okay, I'm gonna carry on then. On the drawings that I have for the terraces, it says with railing and raised wall. I personally need to know that there's going to be some level of protection for the abutting neighbor as far as overlook. You're only 20 feet away from her backyard. You're 30 feet in the air. I certainly wouldn't want that looking down into my backyard. Would you be imposed, I'm going to be suggesting some conditions on this application, but would you be opposed to a condition that the details of that railing and raised wall to provide privacy be to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning?
None whatsoever. We're certainly willing to continue those discussions with city staff throughout the building permit process.
Okay. My second question relates to the parking situation. You've submitted, obviously, a parking justification study that's been reviewed by staff, and they're on board with it, but it's on the basis of the parking being unbundled. In other words, if you rent a unit, you're not guaranteed a parking space. So this is either a question for yourself or for staff. Without site plan approval, how do we guarantee unbundling of parking without an agreement?
Through you, Chair. In some instances, we do put it as a condition of site plan approval. In this case, again, we don't have site plan, so it would be appropriate that you could place it in an agreement.
Yeah, thanks for that. Next question is, you've indicated these units are going to be rental. Is that a guarantee, or are you going to come back with a condo application?
No, we can commit to that today. That is our intent, is that it's rental development.
Okay. I think close to my last question will be, without site plan approval, you're pretty much 80% coverage on this site with hard surfacing. Normally, through site plan, you would be dealing with the engineering department on a stormwater management plan. Either question for yourself or for staff, how is stormwater management going to be handled here?
It would be our intent to follow the typical site planning process. Through that, developing site servicing drawings, landscaping plans. Although it didn't form a part of the details of this application, we've had many of those discussions with planning staff in terms of the landscaping requirements as an example, and meeting the zoning requirements. I'm a professional engineer, a civil engineer, and work in the transportation and land development realm. Quite familiar with stormwater management, and it would certainly form a part of our design process. And we would be developing the same type of plans that would be typically required as part of that site plan application, as part of the detailed design process, as part of the building permit stage.
Thank you. Could I hear from staff on how SWIM's going to be handled?
Yes, through you, Chair. Again, that's deferred to the building permit process.
So can you in fact require stormwater management as part of a building permit application?
The building bylaw was updated as well through the Bill 23 implementation that we did through the zoning and OPA. So that's where it is. It has to be deferred to this process. There's no other process through the city that we can look at SWIM.
Okay, just for the benefit of the other committee members, I cannot move a resolution. If one gets put on the floor, I'm going to suggest some modifications to it. I will put on for the record that I do not support the CN conditions. I don't want to burden this application with the requirement for what CN is asking for, given the proximity of this particular parcel to the CN rail. I think that's ridiculous, but I do want some assurances about unbundled parking, rental units, screening of the terraces, and stormwater management. So at this point, could I get a motion on the floor, please? Mr. McCall.
I see that Mr. Gambetti also has his hand raised, but I'll proceed ahead. Just to get this on the floor for debate, I will move that this be approved, subject to a number of minor adjustments that may occur during the discussion we're going to have. So that's a motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Marco. Can I get a seconder? Second? Okay, we will have discussion. Can I get some comments from committee members? Marco.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes?
Yeah, I just had some comments earlier. Oh, did I freeze again?
No, you're good to go.
Okay. I didn't see any elevations in the submitted drawings. Main comment was, I think, elevations. There was a small perspective sketch, I think, in some of the late submitted drawings. I think some elevations and maybe more perspectives would help get more sense of what the project is. But I think that's just a small comment.
Thank you. Mr. McCall, do you have any comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Maybe it's just the time of year I'm a little confused. Staff has said that the CN request, although somewhat tardy in getting to staff, is a requirement. And you have stated, Mr. Chair, quite clearly that you are opposed to that. So that's left me a little bit confused. So maybe first off to staff, I know we have done CN recommendations in the past for many years. If we're going to approve this, how is this different than Metrolinx?
It is a commenting agency, and they have the authority to require conditions of applications. As with Metrolinx, staff includes those conditions and requirements in our recommendation when they're received in advance of the staff report finalization. Staff would have included the CN comments had they been forwarded prior to staff report finalization. So there's no difference. Planning staff has no authority, again, to advise what conditions can and cannot be included. We are recommending that those conditions be included. It's your ultimate decision.
Just a follow-up comment, Mr. Chair. So if we do not include the CN recommendations, it's up to them to appeal this decision.
They would have the ability to appeal the decision.
Thank you. That somewhat clarifies my confusion. I'm going to sit and think for a minute and wait until I hear our chair's comments on the CN issue. The neighbor is has concerns about this, and hopefully, Mr. Chair, your wisdom will illuminate these concerns a little bit better. So with that, I'm going to make a comment that I have not yet made a decision.
Thank you for being on the fence. I just want to clarify my comments. Staff would normally have put the CN condition as a recommended condition and left it up to the committee to decide whether we impose. And in the past, for some conditions like that where we see no merit in it, we have taken those conditions out. So that's why my position is, if we decide to support this application, I don't think the CN condition is relevant. However, as a friendly amendment, I just want to put for the record, I started off negative on this application, but I've turned myself around as long as there's appropriate conditions being imposed. Clearly, this is a medium density designation. Clearly, somebody could actually intensify this more than what is being proposed. I don't have any issue at all with the side yards, but I have some concern with that rear yard terracing. So, having said that, the Planning Act allows the committee to impose conditions, one of which could be the registration of an agreement on title. So I'm going to suggest a friendly amendment to the resolution on the floor by saying that the first condition, the one and only condition, would be that prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant enter into an agreement with the city to be registered on title to include the following conditions, and I'll be slow so that our staff can hear me out. The first is a requirement for unbundled parking, a requirement for rental units, appropriate screening of the terracing to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, and an appropriate stormwater management plan. Am I clear? Mark, could you understand that? I'm looking for a friendly amendment.
Did we lose Mark again? Anyway, Mr. Chair, you've really put a bunch of stuff, food for thought on our Christmas dinner plates today. Some of those I think are appropriate. I'm just wondering about the screening on the terrace as to the extent that this committee has, under the Planning Act and bylaws, to make it a regulation that the neighbor enter into an agreement with the city suitable to the Director of Planning.
Just to cut you off, it's not the neighbor that's needing to enter into the agreement, it's the applicant that's entering into the agreement. The only other suggestion I had, I'm sorry to cut you off, I was going to actually suggest that this application be deferred to see elevations and the screening of the terracing. But I'm convinced that planning staff can look after that, but that would be my other suggestion.
I guess it's back down to you and I, Mr. Chair. Well, okay, through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant. What are your comments on entering into an agreement with the city for the conditions that have been suggested as an amendment to this application by this committee? So your comments on that, sir.
I suppose the first question comes to mind is what would be the duration of that agreement? Is that just until up in time the occupancy and those conditions have been satisfied, or is this in perpetuity?
Yeah, so there would be some timing relevant to the conditions. So, for example, with respect to the elevations, the timing would be prior to building permit. So the agreement would say prior to building permit that elevations are approved by the Director of Planning. So there needs to be some timing associated with the conditions in the agreement. And I also would put forward another friendly amendment to the agreement that to deal with the CN condition, part of that is noise warning clauses. So actually, if the applicant is going to enter into an agreement, he could put the noise warning clauses in all rental, the first part of the CN request. That could be added to the agreement as well.
Thank you very much, staff, for that. I still am not opposed, or I'm still opposed to the CN conditions. This particular property is located almost a kilometer from the CN line. I don't think there's a need for a warning clause.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we've included noise warning clauses on many applications over the years. I can't specify how many. And as we see, both with CN and with Metrolinx, their reach outside of the actual development includes the whole city. So if we continue to include, and Mr. Chair, maybe I'm in support of you on this, if we continue to add these noise warning clauses, either from CN or Metrolinx, couldn't we just have the city modify their bylaws to include that every development, house, building, ADU, garage, must have a noise warning clause registered on title? Because I think, Mr. Chair, I think you understand where I'm coming from. So I'm kind of in agreement with you on that. I like the application. Generally, it's awkward that we can't put it through site plan anymore. Mr. Chair, I'm going to say I'm in support of those extra conditions that you have put in, and I think they're reasonable and can be accomplished. So that's my comments.
So is that a friendly amendment to the resolution on the floor? Can I get a seconder for that, Marco, if you're in agreement? I got a seconder. Is the clerk clear on the conditions? Okay. If there's no other comments, Marco's got a comment.
Yeah, I was just thinking with regard to noise, I just find it interesting that there seem these conditions for CN and Metrolinx seem to be somewhat common, but as far as I'm aware, they're not required for I haven't seen any yet for highways. That just seems kind of curious and a bit asymmetric to me. Just an observation. It's interesting.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's clear what we're voting on. Support of the application subject to modification to include one condition.
Mr. Chair, can you read your conditions that you are amending to this application, just so I make sure I understand completely? Sorry.
I'll try my best again. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the owner enter into a development agreement to be registered on title, requiring unbundled parking, the units to be rental, appropriate screening of the terrace, I think it's the third-story terrace, to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, and an appropriate stormwater management plan.
And sorry, just to jump in, I would suggest that the wording be that the applicant enter into an agreement to satisfy the condition of minor variance, and that the agreement say prior to building permit, the applicant submit those items.
I'm happy with that.
Thank you.
Any concerns, Marco or Bob? Okay. Motion's on the floor. All in favor?
As amended.
As amended. Application carried. Thank you. All right. Let's move on. Our next item is 107 Country Clare Street, application A 2023-139. If we could get the planning coordinator to introduce the application and the applicant to come forward. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is an application for minor variance for 107 Country Clare Street. It's a rear yard reduction going from 7.5 to 2.5, and this is meters, sorry. And this is to facilitate the construction of a sunroom addition at the rear of the existing detached dwelling on Country Clare Street. Staff have reviewed the variance in light of the 4 tests, finds that it meets all 4, and is recommending approval.
Thank you. Has the applicant reviewed the staff report? Are you in favor?
Yes, we have, and we're in favor.
Anyone in the gallery opposed to this particular application? Seeing none, does staff or the committee have any questions of staff or the applicant?
No, Mr. Chair. Well, actually, a question. I'm assuming this sunroom is going to be a year-round situation. It's going to have a roof and walls, and so I think this is actually a very minor variance, although from 7.5 down to 2.5 numerically is not minor. I think the impact is going to be minor, so I'm in support of this application, Mr. Chair, and I move that it be approved.
Before I get a seconder, I just had one quick question for the applicant. I'm going to support the application as well. I just want to know if you're okay with a friendly amendment. I'd like to add the word one-story sunroom addition. You're okay with that?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thanks very much. Marco, there's a motion on the floor. Can I get a modification to that motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's a friendly amendment.
Okay, can I get a seconder, Marco? Okay, I've got a seconder. Marco, all in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Franklin. Okay, our next application is A 2023-140 at 332 Prospect Avenue. Could I have the planning coordinator introduce the application?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a minor variance application for 332 Prospect Avenue. You may recall this application was previously before you in August of this year for the construction of a single detached dwelling. Rear yard variances to 2 corners of the building were approved. The applicant has determined or decided that they would like to build a 3-unit dwelling on this property instead. Requires resubmission of the application for the rear yard setback, and they also need a lot area variance. So the lot area for a 3-unit dwelling is 395 square meters, and they only have 342.2 square meters. So the need for the resubmission for the new plans for development. Staff have reviewed the variances in light of the 4 tests. The Planning Act finds that it meets all 4 and is recommending approval.
Thank you, staff. Has the applicant reviewed the staff report, and you support the recommendation? Excellent. Anyone in the gallery opposed to this application? Want to make comments? Seeing none, does the applicant want to make further submission? Okay. I want to personally thank you for the updated plans. I appreciate that. It helped me understand the side entry and how it works.
I sent them in originally. I just wasn't. Maybe they just didn't get to you or something.
Okay. So that was going to be one question of staff. The resolution mentions the drawings prepared by Babacon Limited. Does that include all of them, not just the 2 that were included in the staff report?
It does include all of them, yes. They were
Excellent.
submitted with the minor variance application. I'm just not sure why they weren't. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do the members have any questions of the applicant or staff? Okay, seeing none, can I get a motion? Moved by Mr. McCall. Can I get a seconder, Marco, for discussion? Okay, seconded by Marco. Do we have any further discussion? I just want to add that I think this is a great application. Hopefully this is the last time we see this property and you actually build it.
Thank you.
So the motion's on the floor. All in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, our next item is A 2023-141 Cherries, 24 Cherry Street. Can the planning coordinator introduce the application and the applicant come forward? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a minor variance application for 24 Cherry Street. It's to facilitate the development of an attached, or sorry, I always say a detached additional dwelling unit in the rear yard of the subject property. It requires 2 minor variances, one for a lot width from 13.1 to 12.1. It also requires a variance to the required walkway. There's a bay window that projects from the dwelling, so there's a portion of the walkway that's not quite 1.1 meters. It's 1.05. Staff have reviewed the variances in light of the 4 tests the Planning Act, finds that it meets all 4, and is recommending approval, and you will see the Metrolinx conditions there as they were received at the time of staff report preparation.
Thank you, staff. Has the applicant reviewed the staff report, and are you in favor of the recommendation?
Yes, I have reviewed the staff report, and I am in favor.
Do you have any comments about the Metrolinx conditions?
Yeah, we had a chance to review that, and there were recommendations to contact someone with regards to having information about potential noise on title to the property. So my client, the homeowner, will be in contact with that person as per recommended from Metrolinx.
Does members of the committee have any questions for the applicant or staff? I have one question of the applicant. Historically, we've been kind of negative on these easements and warning clauses based on the fact that your property is already there. You know exactly where the rail lines are, and it's not moving. Would you have any opposition to removing the recommended Metrolinx condition or the CN conditions?
We don't have any opposition to, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand that question.
The way the wording of the condition and the requirement for the environmental easement, I suspect you're going to probably require 3 to 6 months trying to work this out with Metrolinx going through their process. So I'm just trying to save you that headache. CN has also asked for a similar registration of a warning clause on title. And I'm just saying, do you care if we remove those conditions?
Oh, okay, I understand. I think that if we are able to proceed with the project on those conditions, we'd be fine with it. So we just didn't want to have to wait, for example, that period of time before we can start the building permit process.
All right, can I get a motion on the floor? Mr. McCall?
Yes, and a comment too, Mr. Chair. And I hope we're not diving down a rabbit hole here, but for the sake of consistency, at least for the last number of months since the demise or since the advent of Bill 23, this committee has been pretty much consistent on not including environmental easements either from Metrolinx or CN. And I'm in support of the fact that they not be included because, as I have stated previously, it would include the entire city. And as I said, it would be easier just to pass a bylaw to include them and we wouldn't have to deal with this. So I support this application. I do have one question. Is there parking for the ADU? I didn't see that. So maybe through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant.
Yes, through the chair, because of the proximity to the LRT, the parking for the ADU is exempt, but we do have parking for the primary dwelling.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, I move that this be approved as amended, not including the CN recommendation and the Metrolinx recommendation.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder? Seconded by Marco. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Motion as amended is carried.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. McCall, I'm going to have to step down as the chair, as the next application I have a conflict.
It's over on this side. Okay, the next application is minor variance A 2023-142, 807 Frederick Street. I would ask our planning coordinator to introduce this application, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a minor variance application for 807 Frederick Street. There are two minor variances being requested today. The first minor variance is to permit required parking spaces to be located in the front yard and within 3 meters of a street line, whereas the zoning bylaw does not permit this. The second minor variance is to not have to provide a required visual barrier between a parking lot and an abutting residential lot line, where a visual barrier is required by the zoning bylaw. So with respect to the first variance, the parking in the front yard and within 3 meters of the street line, staff have reviewed this minor variance in light of the 4 tests. The Planning Act finds that it meets all 4 and is recommending approval. With respect to the second variance, not to provide a visual barrier, staff have reviewed this minor variance and finds that it does not meet the intent of the zoning bylaw, not minor, and is recommending refusal of this minor variance.
Okay, thank you. I see the applicant or the agent is here. Have you reviewed the staff report, and are you in support or opposition to the staff's recommendation?
Good morning. I have reviewed the staff report and I partially support the recommendations. I support the recommendation to approve the first variance related to the existing parking spaces in the front yard, and I do not support the second recommendation to refuse the variance requesting permission to not provide a visual barrier, and I'll be providing comments to that effect at the appropriate time.
Okay, just for clarification, I'm a little confused of the double negatives that are in here. So the staff report is saying that they must have a visual barrier?
The development or proposal went through a site plan application. So part of the site plan application requirements is to provide a visual barrier. And that is in accordance with the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw requires the visual barrier. So a variance was requested to not have to provide this visual barrier in accordance with the zoning bylaw and the approved site plan.
Okay, I think I understand that. And so staff is saying that there should be a visual barrier, and the applicant is saying they don't necessarily want to have a visual barrier. I think I've got that straight. Okay. Are there any other members of the gallery or the committee who have concerns or would like to be heard on this application? Seeing none. The applicant has made their comments. Do you wish to make any further comments?
I do, thank you. All right. Thanks for your time this morning. I'd like to start off by just providing a bit of background and context and a summary of the development proposal and where we're at today. The site is located on the southeast side of Frederick Street. It's between River Road East and Victoria Street North, and the site is just under 1 hectare in size. It presently contains 2 6-story apartment buildings, and there's a total of 94 purpose-built rental units on the site. There's also a 2-story single detached dwelling on the site. Parking is currently provided as underground and surface spaces. The surface spaces are located along Frederick Street, central to the site and along the easterly lot line. A site plan application was submitted to facilitate the development of a new 3.5-story purpose-built rental apartment containing 16 units. To facilitate that construction, the existing single detached dwelling would be demolished, and parking for the purpose-built dwelling would be provided through additional surface parking spaces. The proposed building is located on the western portion of the site, and no development is proposed on the eastern portion of the site. The existing parking spaces along Frederick Street and along the easterly lot line are proposed to be retained as they provide parking for the existing apartment buildings. The site is designated medium-rise residential by the official plan and is zoned Res 6 by the zoning bylaw. The proposed rental development is permitted, and the development satisfies all regulations of the zoning bylaw that would apply to the new 3.5-story rental building. Site plan approval in principle was granted in October of 2023, and one of the conditions includes approval of a minor variance application, and this application is required to address the existing conditions related to the parking in the front yard and the lack of a visual barrier. The site plan that was included as part of the application is included in the staff report as figure 2 if you need a reference point. So as was mentioned, there are 2 variances, both of which are required to address existing conditions. The first variance is to permit parking in the front yard along Frederick Street. This variance recognizes the existing parking on the site and the spaces that serve the existing apartment buildings, and staff are recommending approval of that variance, and we support that recommendation. The second variance, which I'll be speaking to in more detail, requests that there is no visual barrier, or really essentially a fence, provided between the existing parking spaces on the easterly portion of the site and the adjacent lot that's zoned for residential uses. And staff are recommending that this variance be refused. So I'll just provide a bit more context and justification for that second variance next, which relates to the lack of a visual barrier. Along the westerly lot line, so the opposite lot line, there is a vegetated buffer. There's also a vegetated buffer at the rear of the site. Along the easterly lot line, there is no visual barrier or fence. There are existing parking spaces that are adjacent to that lot line. The proposed rental apartment building and all associated parking with that will be located on the western part of the site. There will be no development or modification on the eastern portion of the site, including those existing parking spaces. So in that way, the variance is required simply to address an existing condition. There is only one lot that abuts the easterly boundary of the site. It's developed with a single detached house that's been converted to an office and is presently used for the Alzheimer's Society of Wellington Waterloo for their office. The existing building is not used for residential purposes. The existing building is well set back from Frederick Street, and the front yard is used for parking, landscaping, and driveways. The site and the adjacent property to the east have been functioning together for many years with no issue, and I understand the owner of the adjacent lands provided comments in support of the minor variance application, including the variance that a visual buffer not be provided. So given that the existing lot is not used for residential purposes and the existing building is well set back from Frederick Street, the lack of a visual barrier has no impact on the adjacent property in terms of light nuisance or, light trespass or nuisance, or any impact on any private rear yard amenity space. There's also no issue of incompatibility due to the setback of the existing building and the use of the front yard for parking and driveway. The requirement for a visual barrier or a fence along the easterly lot line is only to address an existing condition. The requirement for adding a fence will add unnecessary financial burden to a small residential infill project. In the staff report, staff did raise a concern that should the adjacent property develop with medium density residential development, there would be no visual barrier as a result of this variance. At this time, there's no development application on the adjacent site, and I would submit that should a proposal come forward in the future, it would be subject to site plan approval, and the need for a visual barrier could be assessed at that time. So in closing, it's my submissions that the variance applications address the 4 tests of the minor variance. They maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw. They're desirable for the appropriate development of the land, and they're minor. Both variances are required to address existing conditions and are triggered due to a site plan application to permit the development of a 16-unit purpose-built rental project on lands that have existing infrastructure, transit services, and are in an area where there is a good range of access to commercial uses. All requirements of the zoning bylaw that would apply to the purpose-built rental are met. The only variances requested address existing conditions which have been present for many years. So we respectfully request that the committee approve both variances for the site, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions of the committee at this time.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask a question of staff and then open it up to the members for any questions or comments. I know this area of the city fairly well. I used to live on Frederick Street. The adjacent house was originally residential, and it is now being used as an office space. Is the zoning on that mixed use or residential, or clarify the zoning for me, please?
Yes, the zoning is Res 6, it is residential.
So if I understand this, if the owner of the property decides to convert it back from office to residential, then it would need a visual barrier.
Yes, so it's incumbent on the property that's developing the parking area to provide the visual barrier, not the other property owner.
But what triggers that requirement is that it's adjacent to a residential property.
On the subject property, yes. So they're developing, there is a parking area adjacent to a residential lot line. If the other property were developed and they don't provide a parking area there, they would have no need to provide a visual barrier in that location.
Thank you very much. So moving along, I guess I'm asking the only other remaining member of this committee, do you have any questions for the agent, applicant, or staff?
Not at the moment.
Okay. No questions at this moment. Is there someone who can, I don't think the chair can make a motion, can they? No. So can we get a motion on the floor to continue this process?
Can I pose a quick question?
Absolutely.
Given that there's only 2 of us present, I'm aware that we need at least 3 to hold a meeting, and I know member Hannah has recused themselves for conflict. So perhaps this is a question either for the chair or for staff, whether do we have enough people to proceed?
I'll jump in here. From what I understand, and I'm not the lawyer, there may be others here who have that certification. From my understanding, when the meeting is started, as long as we have quorum at the start of the meeting can proceed, even though the members of the committee may reduce from the 3 to make quorum to 2. I don't know what we'd do if we only had 1, because then you couldn't get a seconder. So as far as I'm understanding, and subject to anyone else's comments, because this is an important issue, I believe, and it's been in my experience, that we can continue this meeting with a deficiency of 1 member to reach that quorum, but the quorum has been accepted at the beginning of the meeting. Does that kind of make sense?
Through you, the chair, I can confirm that as quorum is present at the beginning of the meeting, we are still able to conduct the vote with 2 members, as member Scott, Hannah has recused himself. I would just note that as there are only 2 of you, if any of the motions on the floor fail or result in a tie, they will fail. Thank you.
Thank you for clarification. I'm glad you're here to add that to us. Does that answer your question? Okay, so we're at the position where we need a motion to continue. Is that a motion?
Yes. For discussion, a motion to approve with both variances approved for discussion.
Thank you. Now, again, we're getting into new territory. A seconder is required, so I guess that means I second that motion. And now I'll open this to a discussion amongst the committee members. Mr. Rubio, do you have any questions or comments that you would like to make on this application?
Sorry, is that for me?
I guess my request at this point is, do you have any questions or comments or concerns about this application on before the committee?
Not really. Yeah, I suppose I'm a little unsure of what to do about the that lot line and visual barrier. I'm wondering if perhaps it makes sense to have a later requirement that if the use of the adjacent property changes back to residential, then the subject lands would then be required to perhaps provide a barrier at that time.
Okay, thank you. So it's really all coming down to a visual barrier between the developing property and the adjacent, formerly residential property. I'm wondering about, can we add a condition that if the adjacent property reverts back to residential, then after the fact? I see you shaking your head. I don't think we can do that
No,
either.
unfortunately, you cannot make that conditional, or a condition.
Thanks for the input on that. I'm not sure that a visual barrier is terribly onerous. I understand it will come with some financial implications, but I'm not sure that it is a terribly onerous to the applicant. So I'm in support. I have seconded the motion. I'm in support for the staff report as it is. Do we have any other further questions or comments from the committee? Go ahead.
Yeah, I believe the motion that I posed would approve both variances, so I think we might need a friendly amendment, perhaps.
Sorry, can you run that by me again?
The motion that I posed would approve both variances.
Mm-hmm.
If we would prefer to approve as the staff report recommends, with with the first approved and the second refused, then I think we need a friendly amendment to refuse the second one rather than approve,
Okay, so if I understand...
if I'm understanding correctly.
If I understand the double negatives here, you are suggesting that recommendation number 1, condition number 1, be approved, and that condition number 2 for the visual barrier not be approved, which means that it goes ahead without the visual barrier?
If I understood Member Gambetti correctly, he had put a motion forward to approve both minor variances.
But now he's asking for a friendly amendment.
Well, because you had said that you wanted to, you seconded the motion, but you had said you had trouble with the second variance. So the motion on the floor is for approval of both variances.
Okay. Marco, what are your thoughts on that? The way it stands right now, as I understand it, with all the double negatives in there, that it is an approval for both condition number 1 and condition number 2, or recommendation number 1 and recommendation number 2, that this application proceed, but it requires a visual barrier.
My initial motion would allow them to proceed without a visual barrier.
So
if we want to require the visual barrier, then we could reject that motion and start a new one, or amend the existing motion, I believe, if I understand correctly.
Through you, the chair, what I would say is, if there's general support from both of you to move the staff recommendation as is, I would recommend putting a motion on the floor to move as is. If not, you could vote on each variance separately to make things a little bit easier.
okay, that sounds like a clear way to go. Mr. Gambetti, are you okay if we divide these recommendations into 2? The first one being the recommendation to be approved, and the second one for the minor variance to be refused. So if you're okay with that, I'll call a vote on recommendation number 1, that this application be approved. Carried. The second recommendation is that the visual barrier that the variance to not require the visual barrier, that be, no, that the requirement that there be a visual barrier, that one is refused in the staff report. So the recommendation is the applicant wants no visual barrier, staff wants the visual barrier.
So
Okay,
a vote
that's-
in favor will result in refusal. A vote in favor will result in refusal.
Yes, a vote in favor of this application, or this condition, means that the request for no barrier is refused, which means the barrier goes ahead. Okay, I see you nodding your head. Thank goodness for Zoom. Okay, what do we do now? It looks like Mr. Gambetti is, I'm wanting the barrier and he is not wanting the barrier. So we have a division of 2. And how do we move ahead? This is an odd one. Yes, Member Gambetti, you have a comment.
I have changed my mind, so we are in agreement.
Driving me crazy here. I should have recused myself too. Okay, so you are in support of the staff recommendation. Okay, good. So we have dealt with recommendation number 1, We're going to deal with recommendation number 2, and the vote is that that the visual barrier is going to be required, if I can reword the recommendation. Okay, I see nodding. So that's, can I just simplify this? Do we want the barrier or not? I do, and you seem to, so, okay. Motion carried. The applicant is required to put in the visual barrier. Having said that, we have voted for that, so,
Through you, the chair, if I could just clarify for the record and for the purpose of the minutes. So we have carried the staff recommendation as is. So the first variance has been approved and the second variance has been refused, correct?
the application was to not require the visual barrier, and that has been refused. So a visual barrier is required. Okay, thankfully, okay. I will go get someone who's more qualified to sit in this chair unless staff has comments.
Okay, our next application is A 2023-143, and that is 195 Franklin Street North. If staff could introduce the application and the applicant come forward.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a minor variance application for 195 Franklin Street North. There are 2 minor variances before you this morning. The first is to permit or allow a personal services home occupation, a hair salon, with a gross floor area of 21 square meters in a duplex, whereas this type of home occupation is only permitted in a single detached dwelling. And the second minor variance is to permit the required parking space to be located 0 meters from the street line instead of the required 6 meters. Staff have reviewed these 2 variances in light of the 4 tests of the Planning Act, finds that it meets all 4, and is recommending approval of both.
Thank you. If the applicant or agent could indicate if they've reviewed the staff report and whether they are in support of the staff recommendation. And I might add, we have your submission and we have read it, okay?
We are in favor of the city staff reports.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think there's anybody in the gallery in opposition to this. Having said that, do any of the members have any questions of staff or the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just a small one, and thank you very much for your personal submission. It's quite the road you have traveled to get here today.
That's
your
my wife.
Your business salon that you want to put, or your salon you want to put in, which is technically not allowed. How many, will you have employees, or is it just yourself? So you'll be dealing with one customer at a time? Okay. I think that makes a big difference. For me, it does. In today's world where everything is becoming more compact, and I do admire and appreciate the entrepreneurship of running your own business, having done that myself over the years. So that's my one question to the applicant, and my comment, Mr. Chair, is that I'm in support of this.
Thank you. Marco, any questions or comments? I should have asked, do you have any other information you want to present to the committee? Could you use the microphone? Thank you.
I had a letter and I gave it to the lady. Yeah,
Yeah, we have read it. If I could get a motion on the floor?
Mr. Chair, to keep things moving along, as I have previously said, I'm in support of this, and so I move that this be approved as per the staff report.
I get a seconder? Seconded by Marco. I'll just make my own comment as well. I was by the property the other day. It seems to be functioning just fine. It's a great location on Franklin for this type of activity, so I'm going to fully support the recommendation. All in favor? It's carried. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And our final application today is B 2023-043 at 18 Stanley Avenue. If the planning or if staff could introduce the application and the applicant come forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a consent application for 18 Stanley Avenue. The proposal is to demolish the existing dwelling and to sever the lot into 2 lots for 2 new duplex dwellings. Staff have reviewed the application for consent in light of all provincial, regional, and city policies, finds that it meets all of those, and is recommending approval subject to a number of conditions.
Thank you. Has the applicant received the staff report, and are you in support of the recommendation?
I have, and I am in support.
Thanks very much. There's obviously nobody in the gallery in opposition, which is a good thing. Members, do you have any questions of either staff or the applicant? Seeing none, can I get a motion on the floor?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I will move. I think this is I move this be approved. I think this is very straightforward, and I think it's a good project moving forward. So I move that this be approved as per the staff report.
I get a seconder? Marco seconds it. I'll just add my flavor as well. I fully support this application as well. I was by to see the property. It's going to be a great infill project. It'll fit right into the neighborhood. So, motion on the floor. All those in favor? It's carried. Good luck.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion to adjourn? Mr. McCall. Do we need a seconder for the motion? If we do, we got one for Marco. All in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.